pushing boundaries and delivering tomorrow.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. We're going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Kaylee Zazula, and I'm the Program and Education Coordinator for Travis Audubon. I want to welcome you to our first ever lunch series. There will be a presentation happening at noon every Thursday this month on topics related to birding and conservation. I want to thank everyone who has donated to Travis Audubon during the COVID-19 crisis. Your support is keeping us afloat and making this new wave of virtual programming possible. We are still running our Resilience Fund, and donations made through that fund will be matched up to $11,000 by some generous donors. We will include the link to donate to that fund in the chat box soon, and any amount that is meaningful to you is greatly appreciated. We will get started on the presentation soon, and in order to prevent any audio or visual distractions from our speaker, we ask for you to turn off your video and microphone if it hasn't been done already. Throughout the presentation, you are welcome to use the chat function, and we encourage you to leave questions there. At the end of the presentation, I will be having a question and answer session with Virginia using the questions you leave in the chat. With that being said, it is time to introduce the woman of the hour, Virginia Rose. Virginia Rose is a native Austinite. She retired from a 28-year teaching career a few years ago and has been busy birding, reading, sleeping, and developing Birdability, whose mission is to make birding available to people with mobility challenges. Virginia, whenever you're ready, we cannot wait to hear from you today.
Okay, thank you so much, Kaylee. And I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm so excited to be here and to present to my alma mater, Travis Audubon. A big thank you for having me, and also thank you all for Zooming. I want to start today's session, as I said, with a great big thank you to Travis Audubon for the years of all of the encouragement and the support you all have offered me. You did not need a national movement to include me in every way. I am so grateful. So next, I want to begin with a question for everybody. And that is, just who do you think we mean when we say mobility challenged? People in the past have responded with, oh, people who use wheelchairs or people who use scooters or canes or other devices. And that's right, but I'm asking us to look further. So let's remember that in 10 or 20 or 30 years, each of us is going to want to continue birding. So I don't want us to think of the mobility challenged as something or someone other. The mobility challenged includes our future selves. My grandmother birded into her 90s. My mom is still birding at 84. Let's keep that in mind as we explore. Just to let you guys know that I am in this position, this great good fortune has been bestowed upon me only because I love birding, because I use a wheelchair, and because I want other people with mobility challenges to experience the same joy I have found in birding. Oh, and I just happened to land smack dab in the middle of a national movement to make birding equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Lucky me. My mission is to show others with mobility challenges the benefits of birding, the possibilities, the learning, the successes, the beauty, and in so doing share a greater sense of freedom, community, and joy. Our objective today is for you guys to learn about Birdability, the philosophy, the steps I took, and the steps you guys can take to make birding more inclusive for those with mobility challenges. I want to begin and end today's program with letters I have received, which best capture the reason for Birdability. At the very beginning of this process, I received a letter from Lynn and Tim Friedlander. It goes like this. I've been reading about and listening to your Birdability project with interest. My wife, Lynn, is now facing drastically reduced mobility due to progressively arthritic knees. We are both 67, in our 8th year of birding together, and very close to retirement. After doing some research, we have determined that using a wheelchair to bird may be the best option. We have been investigating parks in and around Montgomery County, Maryland. The best birding sites here are well known, and we are now assessing them for accessibility, as you have done for Austin, Texas. Your Birdability project might be what we could do in retirement for birding and disabled people in our current geographic area. Thank you for your efforts and time. Sincerely, Tim and Lynn. I was injured in 1973 in a horseback riding accident when I was 14 years old. I began birding 17 years ago when I was 44. In 2003, I was a high school English teacher in Austin, Texas, driving home from school, listening to NPR, when I heard an announcement for a presentation sponsored by Travis Audubon about the breeding success of the house finch. I attended that evening and was hooked. Why? I have no idea. But before I even made it home that evening, I called my mother and I asked, Mom, why didn't you tell me I was a nerd? My life would have been so much easier. I immediately joined Travis Audubon and signed up for every class and field trip. I couldn't get enough. I met wonderful people along the way who encouraged me to go and do whatever I could. At no time did a Travis Audubon leader tell me no. These were my people. My new walking birding companions just followed my lead, and I am to this day very proud of them and grateful. One leader, not pictured, Cliff Shackleford, did not skip a beat when the group encountered a tall set of steps to a rookery. He swung his binoculars onto his back, picked me up, and said over his shoulder to the next guy, "Get her chair, dude." And off we went, no questions asked. On an East Texas trip, leaders Sheila Hargis and Lori Foss deftly hoisted me, chair and all, over a huge tree across our path. Another leader, Jeff Patterson, has for 10 plus years been my right-hand birding buddy, spotting me over roots and rocks and rutted roads, in and out of trucks and golf carts, identifying birdsong all the while. Finally, also not pictured, Dr. Birdie, Byron Stone, out bushwhacking in a central Texas field with my fellow sparrow classmates, encircled a LeConte sparrow and carefully delivered it all the way to me. I was sitting in my chair on a dirt road, unable to join them in the field. The lifer landed 6 feet away from me on a barbed wire fence, giving me great looks. I gave him great looks too. But birding in a chair has added benefits. At the end of the day, I do not just come home with a list of birds and happy memories of conversations and beautiful views. I come home with a very real feeling of accomplishment and pride. I come home empowered. Let me tell you why. The difficulties. Committing to a trip, not knowing if I can do it, is scary. Not knowing in advance the obstacles I will face is hard. Making sure not to impose on the itinerary or others' experience is of paramount importance to me. Each trip requires me to figure some things out. Let me share some usually hilarious situations with you. First, parking. I use a van with a ramp requiring 8-foot passenger side clearance. I cannot tell you how many times I have parked, transferred into my wheelchair, only to realize that my ramp is heading off a cliff or into a fence or a giant rosemary bush or a huge tree, a very deep puddle, and so on. Sometimes I go for it, and sometimes I start over. And then there are those hazardous roadside birders. You know who you are. Try getting out on the side of a road with a ramp. One side offers oncoming traffic, the other deep grassy ditches. By the time I figure all that out, birders are shouldering their scopes and headed back to their cars. The bird is long gone. Then, of course, restrooms. The restrooms that are available are not often accessible. I'm navigating all kinds of obstacles all day long. Curbs, fences, gates, and cattle guards. Just think about that one for a minute. Yes, I can do cattle guards, but I don't know any other person in a wheelchair who can or would do such a stupid thing. And then cow patties, for heaven's sake, going for mountain plovers. The flock took flight once we ventured too close, of course, and we followed, of course. Once I realized I was wheeling over 50 yards of pasture each time, navigating around cow patties, I paused a minute, looked back at my now tiny van, and I thought, wait a minute here, what am I doing? Also, cow patties on your shoes is one thing. Cow patties in your hands is quite another. Then there's the dreaded gravel, rocks, roots, ruts, cactus thorns, and flat tires, mud, and the well-meaning but completely ineffective efforts to make something accessible. Think boardwalks. Boardwalks with boards placed more than an inch apart, scary for skinny front wheels. Boardwalks with railings placed perfectly to obstruct my view. Boardwalks with steep grades that would land me in the creek if it weren't for the railings that obstruct my view. And maintaining my independence throughout is imperative. But I am not complaining. My life's philosophy: difficulty and uncertainty lead to empowerment and joy. And it is the main message to people with mobility challenges who do not know they are birders yet. It is also the message to everyone else. Your greatest accomplishment will not arrive in your comfort zone. The joy. Early in my birding career, I was sitting alone in a forest, listening to and attempting to identify the beautiful vocalizations of the birds around me. I was overcome with the joy of being alone in nature. The more birding I did, the more I expanded and understood my own abilities, physical and otherwise. Birding has brought me a serious and joyful experience, complete with a community willing to include me on every level. And with all that, a level of confidence, a solid sense of self, and a happiness I'd never known. I became convinced that the best we can be is waiting for us in nature. When you look at that list of joys, I know each and every one of you understands. The learning, the friendships, the birding sites, the independence, the community, and the purpose. In the intervening years, I led monthly beginning bird walks for 7 years, compiled a list of 35 plus accessible parks in the Austin area, retired from a teaching career of 28 years, and joined the Travis Audubon Board of Directors. 2 years ago, I decided to do my own Birdathon and named it Birdability. I would bird from dawn to dusk in 5 accessible parks in the Austin area and see as many birds as I could see. I determined to go alone because I wanted to make the point that these experiences can be done independently. In the background, you are hearing the Clint Eastwood song, The Little Faint. So independent, dawn to dusk, 5 accessible parks. Francis Serbins, former president of Travis Audubon, insisted I contact the media. I was very reluctant, but I did finally contact the Austin American-Statesman to tell them about my Birdathon. The paper did a feature, and then the local TV station did a feature, and the National Audubon in New York City contacted me and asked if a photojournalist could fly down to Austin and follow me on my Birdathon. It was a wild and wonderful day. I birded 12 hours, wheeled at least 10 miles, and saw 52 bird species in 5 parks with 1 local journalist and 1 Manhattan photojournalist in tow, whom I drove to the airport at 9 o'clock that night. I'd like to say I would have seen more birds if I weren't so busy entertaining journalists. I did the same Birdathon last year without journalists in tow. And oh, okay, I came home with 65 birds. Since that day, I've been hard at work turning Birdability into a real initiative. I began my blog, Birdability.com, and I have Eric Steger to thank for my domain name. I did not know what a domain was, and on a field trip, Eric told me what a domain was, and he went ahead and purchased one for me. Thank you, Eric. I began updating accessible Austin birding places. I identified local groups in town whose members have mobility challenges. Organizations such as the Spinal Cord Injury Group, the Multiple Sclerosis Group, stroke groups, amputee groups, and Easter Seals. I joined those groups and met the facilitators and members and did a presentation about birdability to encourage participation in monthly bird walks. I started monthly birdability walks for the mobility challenged. Those walks are posted on my blog and on Travis Audubon's online calendar and announced via email to members of various groups. I have led lots of walks in the last 2 years with repeat offenders and upwards of 6 participants in wheelchairs, scooters, canes, people using canes, aging joints, or just slow movers. Travis Audubon added Birdability to its website and calendar. I contacted Lone Star Paralysis Foundation and Austin Adaptive Sports to get help with Birdability programming at summer camps. I am identifying and contacting birding festivals, and I'm so very pleased to let you know that Tucson Audubon has decided to add mobility challenged walks on their next festival, which was scheduled for August. That has been postponed, but Tucson Audubon is next in line, and I'm very pleased and proud of them. About festivals, we do have some work to do. Of course, the topography and the terrain can make it just impossible. And so I know how hard it is to keep a wild place wild, and I understand and respect that challenge. But in some situations, a mobility challenged birder could follow the inaccessible vans to a birding site and perhaps bird just a portion of that site. In Austin, I know the golden cheek warbler is in the parking lot of an otherwise completely inaccessible site. So I want us to be able to identify the easiest terrain. I want to scout and identify the most accessible sites. I want to get mobility challenged walks on the schedule of these festivals, and then get mobility challenged birders to lead those walks if possible. Remember, most mobility challenged birders aren't expecting to do everything. We just want to do as much as we can. And we want festivals to do as much as they can. My motto, You won't know until you go. No one can know what any one mobility challenged person can do. The mobility challenged birder won't know either until he or she goes. That's the whole point. Wanted to give a loud shout out to Mary Gustafson, the chair of the Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival in Texas. Mary had the foresight over 3 years ago to bring mobility challenged birders into her festival. The Rio Grande Valley Birding Festival is one of the first, if not the first, birding festival in the country to offer mobility challenged walks. The leader of those particular walks for years, Lori Foss, brought me in as a leader in training 2 years ago. Last year, I received an invitation to handle those walks on my own. Surrounded by amazing international birders who have been leading for decades is intimidating, that I just keep telling myself, no one can bird in a wheelchair like I can. In 2018, I met Dorothy and Ann, both of whom use rolling walkers. Both women were interested in seeing birds, of course, but as interested in discussing wheelchairs and tires, vans, backpacks, scopes, and the best coffee cups to carry with a wheelchair. I loved hearing these virtual strangers have these earnest conversations about being mobility challenged. It's not just about the birding, folks. The last few mornings of the festival were cold and wet and muddy, but as usual, very fun. Closer to home, the walks are becoming slowly but surely more popular. I have to tell you, I was so surprised that people with mobility challenges weren't flocking on board more quickly. What is wrong with all those folks? My friends just laugh and say, well, Virginia, not everyone in a wheelchair is just itching for the chance to go bird watching. What? I have to say also that walking people are infiltrating my walks. At one point, I tried to tell all the walking people that they were not allowed on these mobility challenged walks. We all got a big laugh out of that. I also wanted to make clear that birdability does not begin by making sites more accessible. My thought is that once we have organized a real, live, mobility challenged audience, not an abstract population, our task will be easier because people really want to help. People like Ann Wasser in Illinois. A letter I received from her early on was meaningful to me. Dear Virginia, I ran across Birdability in the program for the Audubon Convention, and I wanted to ask you more about it. We won't be able to attend the convention, but I love the idea of what you are doing and would like to figure out a way to effectively implement something like this in our community. Thank you so much for your great idea and making nature more accessible to all. And so I developed a 5-pronged approach. Number 1, find folks with mobility challenges in Audubon chapters nationwide. You see, I figured if there is me in Austin with Travis Audubon, then there are others. Number 2, find accessible birding sites nationwide. Number 3, find people with mobility challenges through various support groups nationwide, as I mentioned earlier, Easter seals, spinal cord injured groups, multiple sclerosis. Find the most accessible birding festivals and schedule accessible walks. And find handicapped camps for kids nationwide to include birdability programming. It's such a perfect fit. The campuses are already accessible, and we need to get binoculars in the hands of kids, and maybe especially kids with mobility challenges. At some point in the last 2 years, as I continued to receive inquiries from people all over the country interested in birdability, I determined to enlist every one of them as a Birdability captains. No one said no. At present, Birdability has 18 captains, representing 13 states and 3 countries. Captains and I interact frequently, and it has been so satisfying to connect people within different Audubon chapters countrywide. In early 2019, Hawk Mountain Sanctuary in Pennsylvania invited me to speak. For those of you unfamiliar with Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, it's an incredibly beautiful place. It's a nonprofit, 2,600-acre wild bird sanctuary established in 1934. What a wonderful experience and an amazing sanctuary. In the summer of 2019, National Audubon invited me to conduct a workshop at the convention in Milwaukee. After my presentation, Elizabeth Todd approached me about creating a GIS interactive map to identify and pin accessible birding sites for people with mobility challenges. Within 5 months, using my Access Considerations handout, which identified 9 areas of consideration, she created the map of my dreams. In January of this year, she sent me a draft. On March 1st, National Audubon did a soft launch to a handful of relevant users, including me, the Birdability captains in 12 different states, and some other Audubon staff. On March 12th, Audubon launched the Birdability map to Audubon chapters countrywide. Within 1 week, the map had 100 new accessible sites. Joy! Oh, happy day. More recently, Travis Audubon's own Kaylee Z and Nora designed a great map for the Austin birding area, which includes 35 plus accessible birding sites. Thank you, Kaylee and Nora, and a big shout out to Nicole, Judith, and Kelsey for their unending support. Thanks, you guys. As a segue to closing, I want to share another poignant letter I received in 2018. Hello, Virginia. My name is Diane Allison. Travis Audubon kindly supplied your email to me. My friend and birding buddy of 43 years passed away in February at the age of 63. She suffered from a very progressive form of MS. I saw your story in this issue of Audubon magazine and felt an immediate connection. Allison and I had run into many of the obstacles that you spoke of in the birding radio interview that I listened to today. I would like to send you our story, which I wrote several years ago after our last big birding trip. We had hoped to find a way to share our story, to encourage others with disabilities to travel and go birding. We thought we could share what we learned about accessibility and adaptability, both in places to bird, places to stay, and traveling with a disability. In her memory, I would like to become engaged in helping others enjoy our hobby and our love of nature. I am an experienced leader of bird walks, as well as giving talks, so I am comfortable with people and sharing my passion for the birds. I am a compiler for our local Christmas count and for the Pennsylvania migration count, and am known as the bird lady in my community. If you are interested, I can send you our story by mail, and you can read over what we did through the 16 years with MS as our constant birding companion. After that, maybe we can talk more about how I might be able to help advance your efforts. Thanks, and happy birding, Diane. Well, you can imagine she was promptly designated Birdability Captain of Pennsylvania. She and I continue to correspond monthly. Let me conclude this way. I consider every one of my birding experiences as an empowerment bead, and I feel like I'm stringing them into a beautiful life necklace. This is what I want to share with other mobility challenged people, an opportunity to collect these empowering experiences one at a time. I want people with mobility challenges to know that they can bird, that there are accessible birding places, and that Audubon chapters all over the country are just waiting to welcome them into amazing birding communities. I want them to experience the same freedom, empowerment, and pure joy that birding has brought me. It's the greatest happiness of my life, and I want to show them how to get it. Thank you so very much for your support.
Thank you so much, Virginia. And
I'm so glad you guys could hear me, because the whole time I'm talking, I'm wondering, can anyone even hear me? I can't see anybody. I can't hear anybody.
oh, we would let you know.
Okay. All right.
So we have a few questions coming in from the chat box. So I'm going to be asking you these questions. The first question we got from Diana, and it is, have you included visually impaired individuals in your birding trips?
I haven't. I am speaking from my own experience, and I know that there are so many organizations who have people, birders, who have not yet found their way into a more mainstream way to bird, but we're working on that. And in fact, National Audubon just established what they're calling Birdability Affinity Group. And in this group, we are seeing little sort of pocket organizations of people who are coming in looking for a way to be able to bird more widely. So it's happening.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Another question from Diana is, are you familiar with Knowbility? It's an Austin organization that deals with accessibility and technology. They put together tech groups and nonprofits to create accessible websites for the nonprofits.
Wonderful. I'm going to hire someone to do all that technology stuff. So I love that idea.
I'm looking for other questions. In the meantime, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Where is your favorite accessible birding spot in Travis County?
It would have to be Lake Creek, I think, right there at 183 and 620. It's such a beautifully accessible spot and has so many different habitats, and the birding is always really good there. And so I was just there yesterday, and I try to go at least twice a week. I also love Richard Moya Park, and again, because it's so beautifully accessible, the entire park is accessible to people who have mobility challenges. And I know this is not in Travis County, but I love going up to Berry Springs in Georgetown. Again, perfectly accessible park, a lot of great birds, big trees. The list goes on.
It's so great to know that there are a good amount of accessible birding sites in Austin. And again, you can look at the link in the comments. We have the links to the accessible sites in Austin, as well as the national map that shows accessible sites around the country. And it looks like that covers it for questions, Virginia. So
Okay.
we thank you so much for being with us today and sharing Birdability and your story with us. And y'all, if you enjoyed this talk as much as I did, I'm sure you'll enjoy the other June lunch talks happening, and you can check those out on our website. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And once again, thank you, Virginia, for being here with us and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis Audubon. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.